Well, set him up.
Clean story.
To set him up, ask him the question yourself.
Well,
you tell me.
There was quite a ramble from California, and he was.
You're saying. Let me ask you this. You're not doing a good job. Let me ask you this. Is the mafia connected with carrot juice?
No, the mafia ran Palm Springs. The carrot juice was later.
I mean, I want him to make sure.
I grew up in Palm Springs.
Anything that he's not comfortable.
Okay, well, I don't care if he's comfortable or not. This is about me. It's not about him. I don't care if he's comfortable. Though I do know this: Palm Springs.
He was a millionaire.
Well, I made a lot of money.
He was a very young.
Bought a lot of problems with it. Yeah.
Were you in Palm Springs when Sinatra was in Palm Springs?
Yeah.
Because that's.
Yeah. Yeah, I did art in them days, and did a lot of parties with those kind of guys. That Frank Sinatra, he wasn't really a friendly kind of guy. Guys like Bob Hope.
Yeah.
And Red Skelton. Now those were real characters. Those
okay, well, back up.
Guys.
Sorry, man. Come on, Johnny. You got to tell me.
Case in point, were you or were you not involved with mafia in either?
Well, I never did business
Palm
with them.
Desert and or Las Vegas, or were they looking for you? Were you running?
No.
No.
No, I was like their little darling, I guess you'd say. I did. I started it as a janitor business because when you're a kid with no education, how are you going to get a job unless you lie? And grown up at all.
Why did you have no education?
Because I grew up on a ranch, and we were so many miles away, I couldn't go to school, so my mom taught me. So I learned how to do everything, but I didn't have any papers. So when you go to town, they ask you, you try to get a job, and they say, do you have a high school diploma or something? And I go, no. Well, who's going to hire you if you don't even have a high school diploma? Even back in them days. So I just started a business of washing windows like this. I'd bang on somebody's door and say, hey, Joe, see your door's all real dirty there and shit? I'll wash that thing inside and out and make it look clean as a whistle for $1. And people would go, oh, kid, we got a janitor. And I'd go, but yeah, look, it's filthy, just for $1. I was 12. And they'd go, $1? And I'd say, yeah, if you don't like it, you don't even owe me the $1. So they go, oh, okay. And I'd wash it. In 2 weeks, I had their business of cleaning their places because they said, oh, man, hey, you're doing a better job than our janitor. We like you. And then after a while, I got all like the restaurants. And that's a filthy job doing restaurants. But the mob runs all the restaurants, and the good strategic places. So I cleaned their things. And then after about a year of that, they said, hey, kid, you're wasting your time doing this. The big money's in like cleaning like Bob Hope's house, Red Skelton, Frank Sinatra's and stuff. They said, that's where the money's at. We'll connect you to these guys. And we'll vouch for you, because you're supposed to be bonded and all that shit. We'll tell them you're okay. And so that was cool. So then I'd clean the houses, and you'd make $1,800 to $2,200 in a day. And I'd have to get 3 or 4 friends, because you had to do everything while they were out partying or something. Sometimes they were there at the pool. So that got me started in that thing. And then janitors in Palm Springs, got pissed because I was taking too much business and shit, and I didn't have a license. So they complained to the city fathers, said, hey, that kid's wiping us out, and he don't even have a license, and we got to have a license and shit. So the city fathers, said, hey, you've been around here a couple of years now, you got to get a legitimate license because everybody's bitching about you. And I said, nah, I'm quitting. And they said, oh, no, you got a good business, don't quit. I said, nah, I'm quitting. They said, no, just give us $10 and we'll say you're paying on it. That'd be good enough. I said, no, I'm quitting. I'm tired of it anyway. So I quit. And then I met this guy that was a stone sculptor. He came through town. And we went to Salton Sea, and they've got the most beautiful alabaster stone in the world there. And they don't want the colored stuff. They mine the white shit for sheetrock. So the colored stuff was everywhere. So this guy had a stone sculpture, and he showed the operator of the mine, like, hey, this is what we do and what we want to do, and we'll trade you art for stone. So he said, oh, well, that's shit we just doze over there in the pile. Yeah, get all you want. So we'd go get that alabaster, and with air chisels and air grinders, you can make a nice-looking sculpture in a day, and it polishes like glass. I mean, it looks like harder than hubs of hell. So we'd make a bunch of pieces, and then I went back to Palm Springs.
Would you just say harder than what?
The hubs of hell.
Does that make sense? What did you?
Hubs of hell?
Hell. The hubs of hell. Harder than the hubs of hell.
Harder than, I've never heard of it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just.
Harder than the hubs of hell. And so then I went back to Palm Springs, and in those days, art galleries were, if you could get in, you had it made, you know. But getting in, if you're not anybody, how do you get in, you know? So I'd show them what I had, and they'd say, yeah, that's nice stuff, but, you know, we've already got people and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going, man, how am I going to sell this shit, you know? So then I thought, hey, all those people I clean houses for and stuff, they like to party. I'll go proposition them. So I'd go to people like Red Skelton and Bob Hope and stuff and go, hey, this is what I'm doing now. Instead of cleaning houses, man, I'm doing art. And any piece I got here, and I'd always have 1 or 2 under my arm, and then pictures of it. Any piece I got, I'll give you in exchange for you guys hosting a party at your house, and I'll sell to your friends. Well, shit, they like to party. They're getting free art, and all the wannabes, you know, that come, they buy your shit because what's his name's got a piece. You know, it's sort of a hustle. But it's the best sell. We'd sell 30 or 40 grand. You know, take us about 6 weeks to put a show together.
What years we talking
Have
about?
a great time. Probably, let's see, 60s, late 60s.
30,
to
40 grand in
70.
$60s dollars?
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Big money.
Oh, it was great. And then the mob put me up. They had their little penthouses above the restaurant, you know, for when they want to party with some girls or something. They say, hey, just move up there, you know, make yourself at home. You know, you're good for business. And Italians love art, stone. So I'd put all that stone in the restaurants and then talk you up to people. And I had a wonderful time doing that. And then I couldn't drink legally, but if you're there running the town, the cops don't bother you. You can drink, you can party, you got limo service. You meet all the cool girls they got because they got them, you know, call girls and stuff. So I had a wonderful time in Palm Springs.
Say tall girls?
Tall girls.
Tall girls. Tall girls. They had tall ones, short ones,
But-
beautiful ones.
So selling art for the mob, what could go wrong?
Well, I didn't sell it for the mob. I just sold it. They never asked for anything. I just gave them, you know, if anybody ever said, oh, man, that's a beautiful piece, I go, hey, it's yours, you know. It's cheaper than paying galleries,
Yeah.
you know, and I like the way they do business.
They're probably more honest than gallery.
They're a hell of a lot more honest than the government and police, I'm telling you that.
Well, I was going to say
much.
they're probably more honest than the people who run galleries.
The people that run galleries, they use your shit to hold the door open and stuff, you know, unless they think you're really somebody. And then nowadays they take 40 or 50% of your money. Unbelievable. And that's still how I do money. The people that I sold cars to or something like that, I call them up and say, hey, I'd like to have a show. How about if we have a party at your house and sell to your friends, you know? And if you start at the top, you know, and give them something, then everybody below is going to buy your shit just because what's her name's got a piece. And it's a real good way to sell.
Okay, so I got a celeb question for you. Bob Hope or Red Skeleton or Frank Sinatra, who would be better to have dinner with? Or
Red Skelton and Bob Hope, definitely. And the Prince of Spain was a real interesting guy. That's what they call him. He made beautiful tables from lacquer, where they pour that lacquer out and then they sit it in the sun and it cracks and then they fill it with different colored lacquers. He made beautiful shit. And then that Zsa Kaur, she was a real interesting gal. But there's a lot of interesting people in those days. And they were self-made people. You know, it wasn't like somebody picked them and made a movie star out of them. They were talented. I would have loved to have met somebody, you know, like, oh, God darn, Bob Wells. No, what's the guy's name? What was the entertainer? The world famous fun cowboy. God, his name. Will
Rogers? Texas
Will
Brothers?
Rogers. That's
Will
who it
Rogers,
was. Will
yeah.
Rogers, yeah. I'd have loved to have met somebody like him. He died before my time.
Well, I think
somebody like that had to have been a character. I mean, he made kings and
you
queens
are like
and
Will
people.
Rogers. You were basically like the Will Rogers of this.
He was a fantastic character. I've read stuff of him.
Toilet paper back. You won't need it for weeks.
Have you ever met a man you didn't like? Don't answer. Sorry.
No, I've met a few that didn't like me, you know, but they had one time a guy in Terlingua, you know, he pressed charges against me for assault. He came on the porch one day, and he had inherited his mom's money, and he was nobody before, but he got a big head after about a year, and he pissed everybody off, and he'd come on that porch, and it was a hot day, and he'd come on there, and he started out like he said, "You're all a bunch of fucking sissies." And he ended up looking right at me at the end, not on purpose or something. And I had about that much water in a cup, and I just tossed it in his face, and it pissed him off. He went in that store, and he came back out. And there was this little Mexican guy that had been you know, hauled out in the backcountry by some white guys and robbed of his dope and left to die out in Solitario, and he'd survived. But we called him Chapo, and he was all gimpy and fucked up looking. He was right in my face trying to talk to me in broken Spanish and English, and when this guy come back out, I could see he was going to try to do something. And when he walked past me, he reached out like that, tried to push me over this rock wall I was sitting on, but I had my legs braced, and Chapo was in front of me. And then he kept going, and Chapo, he jumps out, he whips out his knife. I'll kill him for you, I kill him for you, he says. I go, no, Chapo, it's not that big a deal. So the guy goes out, like 2 days later, the deputy leaves a note on my gate. John, I'd be much obliged if you'd go see the JP, you know, which was Ron Willard, the local drunk down there. So I went and saw Ron, and I said, Ron, what's the deal? He says, well, Kyle has filed assault charges on you. I said, for what? Assaulting his ego? And he says, I don't know. I said, will you call him up right now and you tell him to come down here and we're going to resolve this thing, all three of us. So he called them up, and Kyle come down and he says, I'll drop the charges if John never says howdy to me again and doesn't go to any parties where I'm at. And the JP was just sort of a real wimpy guy, you know. I'd never seen him stand up for anything. He had a Jewish old lady that did everything for him. But he jumped up in his chair. He said, Carl, this is the United States of America, and John can say howdy to who the hell he wants to and go where he wants to. And that guy, I think he really hated my guts. He's about the only guy I had really trouble getting along with. But he's still alive, so there's still a chance we might become friends at the end. You never know. Time sometimes levels it out.
I have two questions. I want to hear the Juice Factory story, and I want to know why a guy who's making tons of money in art
Ever left?
ever left.
I'll tell you why. For about 3 or 4 years, I had the time of my life. I mean, everything that you could possibly think of. And then I started having nightmares at night. You know, I just had bad dreams. And they got to be where I was consistently having bad dreams. And I got to thinking about it, and I said, man, something about my life is, you know, where the money's coming from and this life thing is just not suitable to my soul or something. And I'd leave and go down the Colorado River and spend 2 or 3 weeks down there. We had a friend that was the sheriff down there, and he owned a big bend of the river. And we'd go down there and go camping. Wonderful place. And all my problems would disappear, and I'd feel wonderful. And I'd go back to Palm Springs and get in my familiar, comfortable scene again, and I'd start having bad dreams. So one day I told some of those guys that run the joints there in Palm Springs, I said, I'm going to bail out on you guys. What? They said, you know, what's the problem? I said, you know, I just tired of it. I'm having bad dreams at night. I want to do something else. They said, there isn't anything else. What else is there? Just think, when you get old like us, you got money, you got women, you got everything in life you could possibly want. What else is there? I said, well, I can't argue with you, and you've been wonderful. You've been like dads to me and wonderful people, but there's got to be something else. I don't know what it is. They couldn't believe it. They were so disappointed. And I had a 1-year-old at that time, Cadillac Eldorado, and I got in that thing and drove in the middle of the night with all my shit and made it to Arizona. Got out there and then started figuring out what the hell I was going to do in my life. But that's why I left. It's terrible to have a troubled soul where you gotta always be looking for. There's got to be something more to life than this.
Were any of those dreams recurring? Can you remember what any of them were?
No, they were just, you know, mundane shit, you know. But I will tell you something that's interesting. The first 7 years of my life, I lived, you know, out in the country, and it was wonderful. Sort of in the country kind of scene, out of the mainstream America. And then the next 7 years, the first 7 years, no problems as far as the real world concerned. But I had nightmares every night, you know, like wolves chasing you, and, you know, you're running like hell, and you come to a river and there's no escape. Or like you're in the city and there's like a bunch of hoodlums after your ass, and you're running like hell, and you go down some alley, you don't know what, and it's a dead-end alley. It was always shit like that, where there was no possible hope in the world of surviving. And at the last second, you know, when I was about ready to get ate up, shot, mugged, or whatever, a beam of light would come out of the sky, and it was sort of curved like a hook of a hand like that. And I'd jump into that thing, and I'd be looking down at the scene going, oh, man. You know, so it gave me faith. And then after I was about 7 years old, I never had nightmares again and, you know, that thing. But it's been true to my life so many times. I'm like the guy with 9 lives or something where, you know, I've just had things that I didn't think I'd possibly survive. And I'm still here grinning. So I said, man, I'm just going to live and enjoy myself as long as it's happening. And then you talk to people like some of those military vets that were in Terlingua, you know. That one guy like Howard Upchurch, he was from San Angelo. He's a fascinating character. I have about 190-minute tapes of that guy talking. You know, he'd get drunk and talk, and somebody made tapes of him, and I have ended up with him. And he lived some amazing, amazing things. You know, I mean, there'd be like 40, 50 guys in a gunfight with the Viet Cong, and him and 2 guys would survive. And he did that over and over and over and over and over. So, I mean, it makes you look at when your time's to go, it's go, and then you'll run into other people that, you know, they walk across the street and some freak thing, a truck runs over.
No, that's...
So you go,
It's very true. I've given up...
you got to be cautious, but you can't be
I've given
paranoid.
up 2 things in my life, trying to figure out why a couple will be together, because you can never figure it out. You might say, like, you guys fight all the time, you hate each other. I mean, you just can't figure it out. And the other thing is why some people die from a paper cut and other people like live when they're dropped out of a plane. But I got a question for you. Were you draft age in the 70s?
Yeah.
Were you drafted?
I was stupid enough to, my mom, she was from a Hollywood family, and she was a total believer of the system. And my dad was a total renegade. Talk about opposites. But my mom, she was so worried that I hadn't signed. She was trying to be legal, you know, even though our whole life had been out in the country. So she convinced me to sign up for the draft. That was the stupidest thing I ever did. The first thing they did was draft me. Yeah. And I went down to the military induction station, you know. And when I was on the bus going down there, you got a little notification, and I had 1 little coin, and other guys had like 2. And I didn't pay any attention to it. But they said, "Oh man, 1 means that they're inducting you. You know, 2, we're just going for a physical, and then we're going home. You're going in." I said, "Oh shit." So I got down there, you know, and anybody that had whiskers or long hair, they sent you to a psychiatrist, you know, just automatically. You know, and I told them guys, you know, I said, "Man, I never seen a Viet Cong in my life, and I really don't give a shit. If y'all want to go kill them, you go get them, but I ain't killing them. They're not bothering me." And they'd say, "Well, you got to, son. You're going in the Army." I said, "No, I'm not going to go kill somebody I'm not pissed at, you know." They kept me there 3 days, and they'd give me hypothetical situations, you know. And they'd always get me down to the corner, and then I'd go, "Well, now look, in this hypothetical situation, I got a gun in the Army, right?" "Yep." "It's got bullets in it?" "Well, of course." "I'm going to blow your fucking head off," I told them. "That's the first thing I'm going to do with it." Oh, they'd go ballistic. They'd haul me back out there, and there was some little short guy that was the decider. And he'd listen to him, and they'd have pages written on me, and he'd say, "We take anybody in the Army." And like the 3rd day, I attacked that son of a bitch. I said, "You want me to kill somebody? You're it." You know, and whatever they call them, MPs or something, throwed me out the door. About 4 or 5 days later, I got a handwritten note from the military. Said I was too violent for the military. I said, "This beats it all." If I'd have gone over to Vietnam and killed a bunch of people, the right people, they'd probably give me a Medal of Honor, but because I threatened to blow their brains off because they were pissing me off. They said, "Too violent for the military." I never heard from the military again in my life. That was the end of it. They never sent me any draft card thing classifying me, anything. I think they just said, "Forget that guy. Don't give him a gun."
What's the deal with the carrot juice?
We just started, me and a buddy started a carrot juice factory. We like carrot juice, you know, fresh carrot juice is
That's
wonderful.
not such a big...
Where?
Yeah.
So you're still in Southern California, or now are you in...
We started in Indio down there because they grew carrots. And we drank carrot juice, and it's wonderful stuff. But it was expensive, you know, it's like $1.40 or something for a pint, you know, probably twice that now.
Oh,
and one day we went past a packing shed, and there was all these carrots coming out, going into old, like, cattle trucks and shit. We said, "Wow, I wonder what that's about." So we turned around and went back and asked them, "Hey, what's with those carrots?" They said, "Oh, those are culls. We fill up them cattle trucks for those guys." And I asked them, "Well, how much do they pay for them?" $6 a ton. I said, wow, hey, you think we could get in on the deal? They said, oh, yeah, you can get a truck, we'll fill it up. So our first carrot juice grinder was horseshoe rasp, brazed to a revolving drum, and we hooked a motor on it, made a plywood hopper, and we'd ram the carrots down with a 2x4, grind them up. And then we made a press from an old hydraulic dump truck cylinder. That's when I was really learning to weld good. And then you press the lever down and all your welds would come, a dump truck cylinder. That's when I found out about stuff called, pressure relief valves, other assorted deals, where you get bathed in 40 gallons of warm hydraulic fluid. But we finally got it where we could make juice, and then our juice was so fresh, because we got it right straight out of the field, made the juice, that we went around to people and said, hey, have juice. And a lot of people would say, oh, we already got a juice company. Ferraro's was our big competitor. And we go, here, have a sip of our juice. They'd drink and go, wow, this is a lot better. So we made deals with them, and then we ended up making too much, in like a week of selling, we had orders of like 500 to 600 gallons a day, and we were set up to do about 150. So then it was like, build a factory, at night, juice in the day, and everything that screwed up. And we didn't have any money to speak of, so we used U-Haul trucks, with unhooked speedometers to deliver to San Francisco and LA and everything until they finally caught on. By that time, we had enough money to buy our own trucks.
This is there in India?
It was in Indio, and then we moved to Lompoc, because Indio runs out of carrots in the summer, and Lompoc does year-round, and you can get them from Bakersfield and stuff. About 20, I guess, something like that. 20
My
more.
grandfather used to get all, the vegetables and cantaloupe, all that stuff.
For feeding.
Out of those factories and take them down to the feedlot there.
Yeah, it's great.
Joe, do you know California, like Indio and Palm Springs and
As
stuff?
a young boy.
It used to be wonderful country.
He was running 4,000 to 5,000 head of Texas steers out there on Imperial Valley, Sacramento Valley.
Well, you're this weekend. I got enough stuff.
I don't know. I mean, you got to be a special sort, too. I couldn't imagine just hanging out in the bar day after day. I mean, it don't matter if there's 3 people in there. You got to be there, It could be tough working in a bar, day after day after day. You got to become a drunk to stand it.
Oh, yeah, man.
John, you're going south like a bird for the winter?
Yep, the last 3 winters I have. And I lived down there for like 25 years, so.
Well, I want to tell you the story I tell about you. Now, I don't think it's true, but it doesn't stop
Might
me.
have happened to
This is, you once told me, I was talking about some friends who got booted out of Big Bend Park because they had stayed too long. They had stayed like 15 days or something like that. And you said, yeah, that happened to me once. I hid from those guys for a while, but they found me and they booted me out for staying too long. I said, how long did you stay? And I was thinking you'd say like 3 weeks or something. I thought you said 9 years.
No, it was, we were camped down to gravel pit.
Okay.
And back in those days, there was 5 park rangers for the whole damn thing or something. There was nobody out there. So we camped down there, and they had used to have a super shady tree, and right across the river on the Mexican side was a hot springs. It was a perfect place. Oh, yeah, and hang out. So we ended up staying there for probably about a year and 3 months or something. And the rangers occasionally would come through, and they'd go fishing down there and come cook around our campfire. Some catfish or something. I mean, it was real casual. The Mexicans would come over from San Vicente and shit. And then they changed park superintendents, and they got this new superintendent, and he heard about us. So the ranger said, oh, man, this guy, he's like a Yankee from something, and he's heard about you, and he's probably going to come throw some shit at you. So we just ignored it. Finally, one day, he showed up with the 2 rangers, and, he was all uptight, and they were sort of pensive, and he come over there and he says, there's a law on the Big Bend Park that you can't camp in a camp spot for more than 2 weeks, he said. How long have you been here? We had car couches. Right. I mean, look, I've been living there for 10 years or something, So I thought real quick, and I said, we got here yesterday.
So he said, you have 2 weeks more?
Yeah, then he had he said, well, you got 13 days to get out of here. He knew he should have said that then, But I figured, if I tell him we've been here a year, he'll throw us out of me. That's why we got 13 days. I stayed about 5 weeks more, and then they threatened to arrest me with back then they had to get federal marshals.
What year was it?
Shit. probably about 1979 or something like that, you know. So then we moved, you know, when they were threatening to arrest me and everything, and I went to Studio B Portion. That was better yet, you know. It was retired military guys with big pensions. They bought booze for everybody for the next 10 years, and we partied. And the lady that had the store, she didn't give a shit if you crashed the night on the pool table or anything. She knew you'd be there the next morning spending money. And back in them days, there wasn't very many people.
Yeah.
So this was like guaranteed money. So we just lived there and had a hell of a good time. But the park, they choused me for a while. You know, they flew over me in airplanes and helicopters and the narcs cruises. We were just partying, you know. And I figured there's nothing illegal about partying. And they never stopped. They'd go from here to the highway real slow, the narcs and stuff. But, you know, and we just ignored them, you know, looked at them and ignored them, went on partying. And then they flew helicopter over us. Finally, you know, when I left, it got right after January. I took off, and when I drove my old school bus out, I had the helicopter follow me for about 5 miles. But I guess I thought they'd probably have a roadblock for me or something, but I think they were just happy to see me get the hell. They said, "Oh, he's finally getting out of here."
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Don't slow him down any.
Yeah, they all like just Godspeed, you know. No road checks all the way to Alpine, you know. It took me about 6 months before I come back or something like that. And that's with Joe Moss. You know, I had never met Joe. I had to go right from here to the street past his bedroom window. They'd cut a road on down to where the park ranger had some property that said I could stay where we were having all the parties. And the time I was leaving with my school bus out, Joe come out in the middle of the road. I'd seen him and waved at him, but I'd never talked to him. He stopped me. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Oh, I'm leaving. You know, like a helicopter overhead. You know, we're hot from partying too much and shit." I said, "I'm leaving." And he says, "Well, if you ever come back to these parts," he said, "I own this property here and on the creek, and if you ever come back and you want to stop for a while, you're welcome to stay any place you want in my place." And I said, "God, what kind of guy is this?" Usually people don't like a bunch of drunks and partiers. Later I found out people said there was one time when Joe wasn't sober for 10 years. He was a cattle buyer, you know, in Mexico. And I guess to be a cattle buyer, you got to drink a lot with a lot of Mexicans 3 or 4 days before you start even sober enough to do it. Yeah. But then I ended up down on Joe's property there for about 20-some years, and him and his gal, Edna Mae Moss, they'd been divorced in 52, but they were still friends. And she played music. You know, he was about 6'3", big old guy, and she was about, I think she was 4'9", you know. Yeah. But they were both like my adopted grandparents. They were wonderful people.
That's awesome.
And now I find it pretty amazing that I'm back on the same piece of property that used to be Joe's mama's ranch, the original well. That's right where I'm camped and all that. I says, man, 35 years later, I've gone full circle. Yeah.
You started in Northern California.
Southern California.
So okay, how'd you get to West Texas, or why'd you get to West Texas? Do you not like oceans?
No, Southern California was a wonderful place in the 60s and early 70s. And then what happened is it just went to more money and hard drugs and, you know, plumb crazy. And I said, I got to get out of here. And my mom's family was from the hill country. So I said, Texas, maybe I'll go check it out. And I went to Arizona, you know, and that was Indians and rednecks. And the Indians didn't at least dunk you in a cow trough and kick the shit out of you, but the Indians would tolerate you. And I stayed there for a year or two, and then New Mexico, and that's like New Mexico is like the opposite of Texas for the state of mind. And then I said, God, I got to get it. It was all Mormons and Mexicans, you know, they hated each other.
Espanola?
Silver City.
Silver City, okay. Espanola is Sikhs, actually.
Yeah. Is it? Sikhs up there?
Yeah.
And so I ended up, one day I said, I'm going to go to El Paso and see what happens. So I got there, you know, and I said, damn. El Paso, what am I doing here? And I got a map of Texas and seeing that Big Bend. And I said, oh, hey, this looks like an interesting spot. You know, the desert, 3 roads going to it, nothing down there. Hell, I'm going to go check it out. And I drove from Silver City to right outside of Marfa here. And I was tired at night. I pulled off of one of those little railroad siding roads and saw 5 pair of eyes staring at me. And I said, wow, what is this out here? And I got out, and it was porcupines. Look, the porcupines out there. I said, there was a porcupine doing here in a bush, you know, about 4 feet high. And then the next morning I drove into Marfa, and that's right when the Capri was open over here. They had good food. Used to be a hell of a joint. Well, you remember.
I remember the Thunderbird restaurant over here. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Thunderbird Restaurant is what it was in. And,
That has
then
not
I
had
ended up-
good food since I've been here, I'll tell you that.
well, that's for sure. Better bring your own. And then I went down to the hot springs in, the Chinati hot springs down there and hung out there for a month or something, and then wandered on down towards Big Bend and found the park, and that's wonderful down there. That's good country. And a lot of interesting people come to the Big Bend from all over the world.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
And you'd never meet them in a city, because it's too much happening, and you're in different social cliques and all that bullshit. But you get down here and there's nothing else to do, and you say, hey, where are y'all from? People get to talking, and you make friends for life
It's
of
true.
the most diverse and interesting bunch of people. So I love it. You can be in God's country, natural-wise,
Yeah.
and yet you're not like alienated from humans. Because a lot of places you go, they're real cool-looking naturally. Hell, there ain't another person in 100 miles, or somebody that don't like people that look like you. Or
That's
something,
why they're there, because they don't want to deal with people.
Yeah.
But here you get the best of everything. That's the wonderful thing about it. And then I remember the days when Marfa was. I didn't even want to stop in Marfa. It was back in the Rick Thompson days and all that shit. And it was not a friendly spot if you weren't from here. You better just keep it going. And then when Donald Judd moved in, it at least brought a whole nother element of people and a little economic stimulus to the town. And then it brought more and more people in, and it sort of flooded the old powers.
Here
that
we
be
are.
over. Yeah,
And here we are, yeah.
right,
Well,
yeah.
No
I
shortage
wish I
around.
could hang out and drink some more beers, but I've got to go help my wife lance a boil on our dog's ass.
Oh, why
Sounds
can't
like
I
fun.
do that?
Do you want to come by?
Lucky. No, I'm not kidding.
The dog, not the wife.
Yeah, not the wife.
All right, see you,
So I'll
Tom.
see y'all later.
All right.
If this door's open, because Joe's going to be here shortly, so. All right.
Did
Hey,
you,
I got a.
were you ever at the Salton Sea?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I used to go down there and camp for the winter.
Yeah.
At Nyland, at the very end.
Yes, and that the funny thing about that is those are the people that don't want. I mean, they're friendly, but they're not going to tell you their last name, and those aren't people who are going to see you. They don't want to be known. It's totally different than Big Terlingua.
Oh, yeah. You mean down at Slab City there?
Slab City is like these are guys who don't want to have a social security number and all the rest.
Right.
Big Ben, I think, gets more
Well, Big Ben-
hospitable people.
Yeah, and Big Ben sort of tried a few years ago to go, more plugged into the whole scene. They got cell phone, and people wanted the census so they could get more money for government help and fire departments, and that's when it got sort of boring to me, and I went to Mexico.
When
just
was
to get
that?
out of there, 1990.
For how long were you there?
6 years in Copper Canyon.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
My mom's from Mexico.
Oh,
Yeah,
shit. What part of Mexico?
Mexico City.
Mexico City.
But you probably speak better than I do. You spent 6 years there. Huh?
Yeah, I've never been to Mexico City, but I've got a gal friend that's, she just came up. I haven't seen her in a few years, and she's a high-powered artist, in the United States and Mexico and such. And doing fine things, man. And so she's always been badgering me to go down there. But God, it's like 29 million people or something. It's like one of the bigger cities in the
Yeah.
world.
So check this out. When
Is your mom still down there?
no, she's here. But I remember when I was a kid, we used to go there to see her family,
Mm-hmm.
and just to tell you how times are like now. It is a big city with all that goes with it, smog and stuff. But I remember as a kid going there. We'd go for winter, and it would snow, and it would clean the air. And Mexico City was as clean air as Marfa, and it was just a total.
Man, that was a deal. Huh?
Yeah, it was great then. But the flip side of that stuff is it's because there was a group of people that were so oppressed they didn't dare move there or say anything or whatever. It's like, when people always remember the good old days, they don't remember being the kind of people that weren't allowed to experience them. Do you remember the
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They run Mexico with an iron hand for 76 years. Or
Exactly.
something like that.
Exactly. So.
Hey, well, the new president just came to Ojinaga, first time ever. The president's visited Ojinaga the other day.
Were you there?
No, I called and I was going to go down, and my friend said, "Oh, don't come today, John, unless you really want to get in a big hassle," because he says they got, law on both sides of the bridges. The president's going to be here in an hour or so. So I didn't go that day, but I saw in the paper that everybody's thrilled. He's a real young-looking guy, and he's into knocking down those 20-mile checkpoints out of town and making it sort of a free zone for people to go down, putting millions of dollars into helping develop tourism and the infrastructure and stuff. So, boy, everybody in Okinawa is going, finally got a president that actually showed up here and wants to help do something.
The best thing that guy can do, or our guy, is just legalize drugs. I'm convinced there's no one thing.
In Mexico.
In Mexico.
Yeah. Oh,
there's,
yeah.
there's no one single thing that would do more.
They've already hinted at it. That last president did, or the one before.
The guy in Paraguay, do you know about this? Okay, I think it's the leader, it's either Uruguay or Paraguay, was an anarchist. He went to jail for a while.
Really?
Yeah,
now he's the president?
Now he's the president. He's a really interesting cat. He doesn't just want to legalize it. He wants to be able to export it. He wants his country to be a pot exporter.
Well, they definitely make some bucks.
Yeah. No, if you're the first, you'll make some bucks.
Yeah.
Right. As soon as it's like legal all over the world, then it goes back to like,
right. Business as usual.
Monsanto will be the one selling it.
Yeah.
So
wow, that's pretty interesting.
I'll send you that link.
Yeah.
I got a question. I want so what is this heavy metal poisoning? When did that happen? I don't know the details.
Making all those chimeneas and metal art. I've done metal working on and off and worked with metals for years. It never bothered me.
Since California?
Yeah, since I was a kid on ranch. But I got this thing called the plasma torch, and it's the most marvelous device. About as fast as you can draw around on a piece of metal with your finger, that thing will cut any intricate shape. I mean, it's a magical device. People have been telling me about this, and a friend loaned me one, and I used it, and I said, I got to get one. So I saved up, and I got one. And, man, that's when I was cranking out chimeneas and those buzzards and all kinds of metal stuff. But I wasn't wearing a mask. I was outdoors, and half the time there's a breeze blowing, and I've been doing that forever, and it never bothered me. But this stuff would leave sort of like you licked an old rusty tin can on your tongue taste if you used it for more than about half an hour. Well, I didn't think about anything. And then one day, I cut up about 20 some of them buzzards, which was about 4 hours or something, cutting them up. And, man, when I ate dinner that night, it just hit me like nauseous. And I said, wow, something wrong with me. No drinking, no nothing, just eating. And then when I would eat or drink any alcohol, God, I had my body had a violent reaction. So I went and got a, heavy metal test and hair analysis and blood stuff. And I was super high in like lead, cadmium, aluminum, stuff like that had been cutting up. And I used to burn those Volkswagen motors at campfires, because they're full of titanium or magnesium. And they're beautiful. And when it really, they'll burn just like a military flare. They're super bright. Mm-hmm. And burnt them at the Railroad Blues and other parties. And then when they really get like so light that standing near your shadow would go all the way across the street, thing. If you threw on like some big old truck radiators, copper radiators, it turned blues and greens and purples. Oh man, it was far out.
How would you ignite them?
You have a campfire first, wooden campfire, like just a big floor of fire going.
Wood gives you enough heat to start those things?
Yeah, it takes it. They have to sit there on a big bed of hot coals. It can't just be flame. It's got to be hot, and it takes about 20 minutes. But once they catch on fire, there's no putting it out. And then if you squirt water on like a Volkswagen motor, which is primarily magnesium and aluminum, if there's no wind blowing, it's like fireworks in reverse. All these little sparkly things, white sparkly things, go up in the air. They're all burning, individual little sparkles. And it makes the perfect mushroom cloud. It's all illuminated. It's just cooler than all get out.
Is that in essence then what you were breathing?
Yeah, I was the idiot up there poking the fire and putting the shit on, and in between that, and so I just breathed all that crap in, and finally it got to me. When it did, it was just like, if you're drinking and having a good time, and then the next drink you're like dead drunk. It was like that kind of effect. So I had to quit drinking and had drunk gallons of carrot juice and detox stuff, and then I met this gal in Big Bend, Carrie Ann, and her mom was a heavy metal specialist doctor, so she helped me and a few things like that. And now, as long as I don't drink a bunch of alcohol, I seem to do pretty good. But man, it really got my attention there for a while.
Sure, but you continued to weld. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, but I don't do much anymore. Nothing like I used to. I don't use your plasma cutter. Right. Sometimes I wish I could, but Dawn looked up on the internet, and you can buy these masks. They're about $2,000, piped in air and everything. But a while back, a friend of mine gave me these things called Scott's Air Packs. They're made for like operations in the oil field.
Mm-hmm.
You wear them on your back with a scuba tank, and if H2S gas or something happens, you breathe in air. So I've got them because they're outdated, and I'm going to just get rid of the tanks. I don't need them, and hook them to an air hose so I'll have fresh air. I've got an air compressor with a diaphragm, so it's not like a piston, with oil, and pipe fresh air in. And I've got all that part, and then the face mask part that's here, I'm going to cut out carefully and put a welding shield goggle in so I can be looking at the arc thing. And I'll have exactly one of those $1,800 masks. I can look at the welding thing, and then I'll have piped in air. Because the thing is, those other little respirators that fit on your face, you got to be totally clean shaven and even put Vaseline on your skin to make them really work.
I got an EMT license, and when they were fitting us for a mask, they sent me home for not shaving.
Yeah, you got to be even like you got there, it won't seal good enough, they say. So I'm just got that whole face mask.
Behold.
Yeah, righty. And then just turn the air up so that everything's positive and leaking out, and that way you can't breathe it.
Tell me about how you grew up, because anyone who sees you today thinks you're a cowboy. If you told them you grew up in Southern California, they're not going to believe you. I'm telling you that now.
Well, believe it or not, Southern California has got, California's got horse ranches, cattle ranches.
Did you grow up on a ranch?
We raised goats because we lived in what's called the Anza Borrego Desert.
When did you start wearing a cowboy hat?
Oh, when I was a kid, probably.
Well, you're showing me. Okay. All right. I mean, I live in Southern California.
Yeah. Well, do you know where Palm Desert is? Palm Springs and Palm Desert.
Yes.
There's that Palms to Pines highway that goes up, all those crooked roads, and you get up right away, and you're overlooking the whole lower desert. Well, when you
Like
get
Idlewild.
Yeah, well, instead of turning right to Idlewild when you get to the top, if you go straight ahead, there's a little town called Anza. You know where that's at? It's on the way, if you're going towards Fallbrook and San Diego.
That's where you grew up?
Yeah.
Well, I know this. So you're actually further east, but where I live, if someone wears a cowboy hat, it's because they want people to think they're from Texas.
No.
And if they can pull it off, they'll probably want people to think they're from around Marfa. So, how'd you get to start making the So Toll?
Well, believe it or not, as a kid, I never drank. I tried drinking beer a few times, and damn, I didn't like the effects of alcohol really. And then when I was about 12, I run into a bunch of Mexicans, and they were all smoking grass, and that was a hell of a lot better. Forget that. So I didn't even do that until I got down. Me too. Until I got down here to the Big Bend, and everybody drank in this part of the world like fish. I've never seen people drink so much. There's a huge alcohol consumption in West Texas. What else is there to do? And I drank beer, and I never drunk probably more than 2 6-packs in my entire life. I was like 30 years old then or something. And I drank beer because it was those retired military guys, and they, some guys like beer, some like Lone Star, some like Pearl and stuff. But when they'd get one, alcoholics, drinkers, they like other buddies. So they'd say, here, have a beer. So, and it was 110 from 15 degrees. Yeah. So somebody hand you a beer, and it's hot, and I drink a beer. Well, I got to where I drank about between a case to a case and a half a day. I mean, that's a lot of damn beer. Really?
Come on.
You can live off beer. It's got calories and vitamins and all that good shit in there. But the effects, what it did to me, it just made me feel like, ugh. When it's hot and you just drink beer, I mean, it's just like, oh, man.
Were you ever not skinny?
No, I've always been. Since I was about 14, I've had the same body, a few more wrinkles and
what does that tell you then? I mean, if you can drink a case and when you say
didn't do anything for
when you say a case and a half beer, you mean a 6-pack and a half a day?
No, a case.
Okay.
Like 4 to 6 6-packs. Well, it's hot. Just imagine, it gets hot at 9 o'clock in the morning.
John, I've been in hot places.
10 o'clock in the
Did you eat? Or did you just drink?
No, just drink beer. You don't need.
You know what it
if
is?
You get cheap beer. What's that? Milwaukee's Best and shit. They're full of all kinds of good shit to live off of.
No, a man can live off bread alone, and beer is bread. Same ingredients.
I guess it is.
Same ingredients.
Well, and you don't get hungry because you're always full. You got that full thing. About twice a week, some of those guys, Howard Upchurch or Amo Elmo and stuff, they'd buy 4 or 5 loaves of white bread and some bologna and cheese, and we'd eat some real food.
How did you? Oh, I'm sorry.
But it just got to be, I was starting to just feel like, thinking, God, I got to quit drinking this beer. And then Lico, Lico Miller down
Sure.
south. Well, Lico's dad, he was living in Mexico for 7 or 8 years, and I'd never met him at this time, but he came up here and he stopped at his TV porch and he had a bottle of that Sotol in his hand. And I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, I'm drinking it because I got a toothache." And side of his jaw was a little swole up, I said, "Well, man, I ain't got a toothache, but would you mind if I tried a little?" And he said, "Oh, no, here, have some." I took one swig of that, and that was the end of beer. I said, "The hell with beer. This shit, makes you feel perky and alive and get going." So then I drank too much of it. It took me about a year, and I got alcohol poisoning. Every scratch I'd get would get infected and wouldn't heal up and shit. And it took me a little while to figure out that I actually had alcohol poisoning. And then I had to quit drinking. I quit drinking for about 6 months and went to the hot springs and soaked in that and got healthy again. And then when I came back, I drank in moderation, and had lots of friends that helped me drink.
How'd you meet Beverly?
At the river down there. Me and Larry went over to Ojinaga in the 80s, early 80s. Ojinaga was rip-roaring. It's when all the local dopers were local guys, and everybody was hustling dope. So they had money, and they were from Ojinaga, so they spent all their money in town. Now the guys that sell shit's big loads, and they go party, in French Riviera or something. But back in them days, it was local boys. So, man, Boys Town was rip-roaring. They had wonderful bands, lots of action, cute girls. So we went over there and spent about 2 weeks there. And when we were coming back, Feather Maxwell, Feather Maxwell?
No, I know the name.
She's in Alpine now, but she was camped there on the river. And we said, "Hey, there's Feather's camp." So we stopped and saw her. And there was Beverly. And we headed off. And we were together about 20-some years, long time.
Well, I just asked because I loved her. She had like a Carrie Nation kind of thing going on. Like she would tell me or tell anyone. I mean, I was close to you guys in drinkability and eatability. Yeah. But if you were eating the wrong thing or drinking the wrong thing, she would just tell you like the day you were going to die. She said, "You have 3 weeks left."
Yeah. Right. So the first 10 years was wonderful. We were together every single day, every single moment. And had she was a real adventuresome gal, and the thing I liked about her, she could go live with Indians or she could go to high society and just instantly shift gears with any kind of people and everything. But then the later part, she was a little judgmental. And at the end, she thought I was hanging out with nothing but druggies and drunks. So I said, "Well, I've been doing that all my life. Nothing's changed." Actually, most of the time, they're more interested. Unless you're kicking me in the shin every minute, I'm not going to say anything about it. People, sometimes they have good days, sometimes they got bad days. I mean, that's just people.
I thought you, and this is one of the things I've loved about you from square one, you obsess about the things you like.
Yeah.
So you can't stop talking about the stuff that you love.
We went in opposite directions. Hey, but I just read this quote the other day. I might probably still got it on my phone here. It's by Socrates, and it's an excellent quote. It says just what you were saying right there. I got to look it up because I don't have a very good mind to remember it here.
I've never seen an iPhone like that. Is that epoxied?
No, it's a anti-glare cover because I couldn't see it. It was always so shiny in the sun. So this gal put an anti-glare cover on, but she didn't clean it good enough here. It's been on there 2 years, and it sort of started tearing apart.
So actually, I'm wrong. You keep your phone in great shape.
Well, the other day is the first thing I did in 3 years of having this thing. It fell out of my pocket, and I didn't know it, and I drove over with my 1-ton dually. And luckily, that's all it did. It's not in a case. It needs to be.
No, it doesn't need to be. You know why?
It'd be safer.
Have you ever eaten food without spilling it on yourself? Trust yourself, man. You can live without a case.